Hey, welcome everybody to our GLREA Thursday evening Zoom, our Michigan solar story. I'm John Sarver, and the first thing I need to do is to thank our sponsors, the State Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy, Eagle, Homeland Solar, Harvest Solar, Shree Energy, and Sumter Solar. And also, please mute yourself during Tom's presentation. And I bet most of you are members of GLREA, but if you're not, we would love to have you join, which you can do online at our website, www.glrea.org. And I don't think Tom Stanton really needs any introduction. He's been a speaker with us before and has been around for a long time, doing a lot of work related to renewable energy. So, Tom, go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here and happy to see the such a good audience coming tonight. When you have questions, don't wait till the very end to send them in. If you'll send them in the chat, John will be watching, and then if they're for clarification, I invited him to interrupt me and make sure that we're getting ideas across clearly to everybody. If they're about the content, we'll discuss them at the end. And I will plan to go through quickly so that we leave plenty of time for questions and discussion at the end here. So here's the subject and a little teeny bit about me on this slide. Let's go ahead. Here's a outline of what I'm going to cover tonight. And number one is something about the history with this, what they call balcony solar in Europe and how it's getting started here in the United States. And, hopefully a bunch of valuable information to everybody who is starting to think about this and how it might apply here in Michigan. And I love this expression, to make good trouble, that I learned just in the past couple of years here. The little image there that says "move your money" that comes from my friend Michael Schumann, and you'll find a link to his information later in this presentation. But he's been telling people for years and years now. He first came to Lansing in 1980, and we've been friends ever since. He writes books about how to invest locally and how to move your money from Wall Street to Main Street. And his recommendation is that everybody should get started with 1% of their money of all your investment funds, move them into local investments. So that's been a hobby of mine. It's something I've been working on for several years now. And the third point here on this slide is that I'm now going to be a participant in the 2025-26 cohort of the National Coalition for Community Capital Accelerator Program. And I'm going to be working with them to launch some Michigan funds. They will be described here. That group, called NC3, is already starting with pilot testing of their new investment vehicle called Diversified Community Investment Financing. And they're starting with Lansing and Detroit as it happens, and a project in Petoskey, another in Grand Rapids. A few more are already underway, and then more are already being planned. So very exciting to me to be a part of that as we get started. So here's a little bit of the history of what's been happening in other countries, especially in Europe. And that link goes to a really good story about the status, and you can learn a lot from that link. They call balcony solar very small systems that people can just go buy at the store or have delivered. They come, you unpack them, you've got your solar panels, you've got batteries if you ordered batteries. They have a special built-in inverter, and the inverter is very smart so that it knows to protect the safety of the utility grid should you ever feed back energy into the grid. And they know when they can safely feed back into the grid. And they are now limiting these balcony solar units to connect to 220 volt circuits, no more than 800 watts, and no more than a 2000 watt solar panel output that can serve one household circuit safely without overloading the circuit and without overloading the wires. There's a lot of intelligence built into this and safety built into this, and all those devices ultimately boil down to the plug. When you get home, you can simply unpack the system. People literally hang it on their balcony, like you see in the picture, and then you plug it into a wall outlet, and it's good to go in your home without causing a problem for the utility. This uses special connectors, just like the ones we have for electric vehicle charging, that are made so that you can't get a shock because it really doesn't start sending power until all the pins are plugged in. And then it'll start to send the power. So if you unplug it part way and you touch one of the pins, you won't get a shock from that. There's really good safety provisions built in here. And then the data shows that by the year end of 2024, in Germany alone, this is not the whole EU, but just in Germany, 780,000 systems like this had been registered with the utilities and the local governments to tell people they were there. But now there's no requirement for anybody anymore to have to notify anybody, not the utility, not the electrical code people, not the building code people. You don't need any special insurance. You just bring it home and plug it in, just as if you had bought other kinds of devices that use electricity. This one happens to both use it and produce it, but because they've made them quite safe, very, very safe, they are just letting this happen like crazy. So notice on this slide, the price fell from about $2,000 in 2015 down to about $200 in the last year or two. So because the manufacturers have been able to standardize everything, you get into mass production, then the price really can drop very, very precipitously. In North America, we saw quite a bit of interest, and in Utah, the state legislature in Utah passed a new law in 2025. There's more about that in the next slide. The representative who introduced it is a medical doctor, a family practitioner medical doctor, and he was very concerned about people being able to run their medical care devices during outages. And that's part of the impetus why he got this started. And it passed the Utah legislature, both houses, with almost unanimous approval from almost every single legislator, and then was signed by the government in this March. There is similar legislation already introduced in Maine, New Hampshire, New York, Pennsylvania, South Carolina, and Vermont, and in consideration in more states. And in some 30 states in the United States, we already have some kind of pretty comprehensive laws and rules governing community solar, plus renewable and clean energy portfolio requirements, plus state level or utility level or corporate level climate action plans. And almost all of those include some provisions for distributed energy resources and for helping to serve low income customers. So they also make a very important potential pathway to add plug-in power to some of those laws and rules that are already in place. There are hurdles that still need to be overcome. And here's a list. The National Fire Protection Association codes don't yet want to necessarily approve of any energy storage and or electrical generation until they can be satisfied that it's not going to be a fire risk. All the local authorities that have jurisdiction over the electrical codes and construction codes may have some difficulty accepting the idea that now we're going to be able to bring home and plug in our own generating devices. The underwriter's laboratory is not yet all the way set up to provide the testing and approvals for new equipment. The utility interconnection rules and standards were not written to open up their systems to this kind of flow, so that, there are obstacles that need to be taken care of. And I'm part of a international group that's not particularly organized at this point. It's an ad hoc committee meeting once a week to talk about these issues and try to see how we can move it forward. The essence of what all this means for now is, right now, if you're going to do this in America, you got to keep the system quite small, probably no bigger than 1 kilowatt. And you have to be a little bit cautious about how you use it. Just as if you brought home a space heater and you plug it in, we want to make sure that it's not going to cause a fire and that it's going to be safe to operate and nobody's going to trip over it and get burned. I mean, there's all kinds of risks that exist, and we just have to be cognizant of it if we get started before all these codes and standards and safety provisions are in place. I wrote this slide to try to explain a little bit of the logic. Why is it that so many users might care about this or already do care about this? One is these kinds of systems can be really low cost and really affordable for people. And, obviously there are thousands and thousands or millions of people who are not homeowners, maybe can't put a solar system on their rental property, maybe can't afford the 10 or 20 or 30 or more $1,000 investment, but they can make a few $100 investment. Or there are different programs available where we can help bring the small solar systems to users who need them using other people's money and letting those people pay back over time, the same way we are able to now take out loans using the Michigan Saves financing and make all kinds of improvements in our facilities. We can add some plug-in power to those systems. These systems are also highly portable, and we can use them during grid outages or grid disturbances. So they can provide a kind of reliability and resilience that otherwise the utility itself can really never provide using poles and wires. Unfortunately, some 95% or more of all the problems that we experience on the utility grid are not because of generation shortages and not because of transmission shortages. They're because of interruptions and problems that are caused in the low voltage distribution system very near to where the users are, but they can affect us and sometimes affect us for many days or even weeks. That high reliability and resilience can be used in almost any circumstance to serve small loads, but loads that are critical, especially these medical care devices and all kinds of emergency power systems. They're also then very acceptable to travel. And, people more and more are using little solar panels when they travel, and those are already available for every kind of travel you can think of, by car, by boat, by airplane, by, um, you know, railroad train, anything you can think of. We can now get our small portable solar panels and we can use them to keep our devices charged and use them for emergency lighting and all kinds of emergency services. Because these are so simple and so easy to use, and because electric vehicle charging is coming now very quickly with vehicle to grid capability, they're creating more and more avenues whereby people can adopt and start to use these plug-in systems even before we've solved all the code requirements and all the legal requirements. Um, this is a slide to show some of the common household appliances that we already very regularly buy and use and bring home. And then at the bottom, how does plug-in solar compare to those? And we can, now look at this list of bullet points on the left. I think the history in our telecommunications industry is very telling. You may remember, those of us who are mature enough, the great fights that took place between the incumbent monopoly telephone companies and all the companies that wanted to be able to bring their own hardware. And at first, the only entity that could sell us a phone was the monopoly utility. And they did have nice phones. They lasted a long time. They worked well. They were reliable. But once we opened that up to a full market, then all kinds of innovations came into play. And I do believe the same model now is, pretty compelling to think that we could apply this to utilities of other kinds as well, electric utilities, and ultimately, I think, to our gas utilities, other deliverers of heating fuel that are not necessarily state regulated and so forth. Our grid modernization plans all over the country and nationally already include this idea that we are going to end up with a grid that is omnidirectional, with power coming in and being taken out at a million places all over the grid all the time, and real-time communications between devices and the inverters that are handling power flow and the utilities themselves, and whoever ends up being this distribution system operator that may be the utility, but it may be some other less regulated or unregulated competitive distribution system operator. And then the bottom point here, very, very, very important. Right now, there are no legal or regulatory issues unless and until the user wants to backfeed some power to the utility. We can bring home these units today and plug them in, and as long as they're set to never backfeed into the utility grid, then it's nobody's business but our own. I would not recommend going into it without carefully checking safety requirements and, how reputable is the manufacturer, and doing some careful shopping. But it's wide open, and we are already seeing people do it by the hundreds today. And that's rapidly growing as more and more people catch on to this possibility. I made a list of some of the companies that we already know are operating in this realm. Several of these companies are already participating in the working group that I'm a part of, and we're holding Tuesday meetings. You'll get your invitation to that here in a bit. You can always send me an email and let me know if you're interested, and I can add you to the mailing list so you'll get the announcements when we're having those weekly meetings. There's one coming up that will include a national public broadcasting television and radio reporters from KQED in San Francisco. And they're going to be interviewing some of these manufacturers and writing a program for NPR about it, especially because of the recent interest in California. Excuse me. So, other key ideas for why we might want to care about this. It can help serve energy justice goals, especially because the estimated 70% of everybody who lives in the United States is not a candidate for putting rooftop solar on their building. They may be able to hang a couple of solar panels on a balcony, or hang them on the side of their house, or put them on wheels and pull them out into the sunlight when they're needed. But their home is not necessarily a candidate, and their income doesn't necessarily support it. And maybe they're renters who can't get permission from a landlord. So this is an important market, and it's a big market and growing quite rapidly. There are certainly people who believe that this commercial market really can't open all the way until we solve the issues involved with codes and standards and the potential to interconnect and backfeed to a utility. And then we have to wait to see what's going to happen with all the different utilities. Some utilities might not yet understand why this is in their best interest and why this will make them financially healthier rather than risk revenues losses to them. So there's a lot of education that needs to be done. This is a brief history of what happened in Utah. I'm not going to try to read all this to you, but there's a link to the bill. Information about Ray Ward, who is also a member of our ad hoc interest group and also working on this. It gives highlights of the essence of what this law does in Utah. And notice in Utah, the maximum power output is not more than 1,200 watts. In Germany, they say you can go up to 800 watts of solar and 2,000 watts of battery power, or actually the 2,000 watts is maximum solar production, and 800 watts is be the maximum that can be exported. That is because they're using 220 volts AC power, and we're using 110 or 120. So because we have a different standard, it's a smaller number that got started in Utah. I looked to try to see, was there any evidence of utilities trying to fight this in Utah? And I really cannot find any. It doesn't mean there wasn't any, but it's certainly not made very public. I searched all over the internet and couldn't find any evidence of that. Now, in thinking about what might this mean for Michigan, there is a question of whether Michigan can or should or will introduce similar legislation. We know we now have another shot at community solar legislation being introduced. That's been introduced every year since 2012, and it hasn't passed out of committee yet, but who knows what might happen in this new year. Uh, we already have distributed generation tariffs instead of net metering coming into play in Michigan. And because those are directed to be based on costs and benefits sharing and reasonable compensation, I think there's some real potential for the DG tariffs to be used in a way that can accurately assess the value of plug-in solar if it's sending power back out into the grid. It can accurately reward customers for taking loads offline if they're using it all behind the grid in their own facility. Right now, the MISO market is working on implementing FERC Order 2222, 2222, and FERC Order 2222 says to all the wholesale markets, you must open your wholesale market to entities that will aggregate small energy systems together and then manage them to control their supplies and demands with respect to the wholesale market and wholesale market prices. Now, that those same principles can certainly be applied at the retail market level, but at least for now, Michigan Public Service Commission has decided that only the regulated utility can do that in its retail market, except for the schools or other entities that are already on the customer choice tariffs. That's restricted, as you probably know, to no more than 10% of the Michigan capacity in the previous year. So there are 10% of all the customers already being served this way and 10% waiting in line in case more opportunity opens up for them. One immediate thing we could be working on is talking to all the schools that already have service from one of those competitive providers and working with those competitive providers to provide the school systems with plug-in power systems that they could use in the schools. And that could be easily a multi-million-dollar proposition starting in 2026. And the bottom point I make here is we use a model called REMI, the Regional Economics Multipliers Incorporated, I think is the I. That model is used by University of Michigan researchers and people who contract with the state of Michigan to do all kinds of economic input-output modeling. And the models that REMI makes have been improved. So now we can specify when we do this modeling, we want to know the internal effects on the utility finances for these changes. And I'm absolutely confident based on previous studies, they've been doing these studies since the 1980s, that when we spend our money on distributed energy resources, they will very reliably produce many more times the jobs, more economic development, more environmental protection, more ecological protection across the service territory of the utility. So they'll actually result in improvements to the utility's bottom line and helping to make the utility more profitable, not less. Unfortunately, the utilities don't yet quite recognize that. They're going to need help. We're going to have to point it out in the clearest possible language. I put together these ideas for an action plan. These are my wacky ideas. They don't have to be yours, but there are several different pathways, I do believe, where we can start to move forward in positive ways. And I'm hoping others will share that enthusiasm and we can start working together to make it happen. What are some of these primary opportunities? And I have named these different market types. A convenience market, because boy, oh boy, we are all using solar powered batteries and we're all using all kinds of cordless devices, wireless devices, devices we can charge using any kind of plug-in charger or solar panel chargers. And the list keeps growing and growing and growing all the time. I am working on my own case study in my own home and working with somebody who's got a remote storage building, but sometimes they want to be able to enjoy that storage building with things like some heat, light, maybe a radio or a computer. And so they want to be able to run things without running the wire to the building. Critical needs are everywhere in every kind of building. And I encourage everyone to start making your own list. What are your critical needs? And try to estimate how much power are they going to need? Because this is going to help you decide, do you need one of these systems? How could you use it? How much would you be able to use it? And what would it save you? Especially if during an emergency, you can do things that you need to do and not worry about the duration of that emergency. For low income consumers, this is one of the proven technologies that is helping the best programs in the country already achieve more than 50% cost reductions across all their utility bills. Not electricity only, but their electricity, heating, fuels, telecommunications, broadband, water, sewer, it's all utilities. 50% is a big deal. It's nothing to sneeze at. And this can be the difference between life and death when power goes out and people don't have everything they need. It can be a difference between homelessness or not homelessness. And there, some of the Michigan projects that are already underway are very, very closely focused on this. How can we use these programs to help prevent and reverse the trend towards homelessness? The Next Billion project, called Next B, is one I absolutely love. And it happens that it's being run worldwide by the Davidson Institute at the University of Michigan. We're working with them right now on how can we pour our money into that institute so that that institute can help make this happen all over the world. And if that happens to include Michigan, wouldn't that be nice? Next steps that we can think about, a bunch of things already going on. GLREA already runs the Solarize program that enables bulk purchasing at lower rates for people who join together. So we can certainly do that. There were just some big announcements about millions of dollars of electric school buses that are being delivered to Michigan in the next year. Just think every single one of those school buses can be a portable, movable microgrid on wheels that can serve emergency needs in the event of a utility outage by driving to the place where it's already set up for them to plug in. And they plug in and provide emergency service and get paid for it. This is going to happen. There's already a Michigan company that specializes in this and makes such systems in Jackson, Michigan. And so it's a wonderful opportunity with a lot of cool things happening. At the bottom here are logos for a few different organizations. Clean Energy States Alliance has a big activity going on in this realm with 20 or more states participating. From time to time, Michigan has participated. GOGLA is the Global Off-Grid Lighting Alliance. I think that's what it stands for. And they are doing standards and consumer protections and creating and publishing catalogs of all this kind of equipment in every scale from 1 to 10 watts on up to community scale or village scale systems. Practical Action is the entity that was formed based on the ideas of small is practical by Mr. Schumacher. Schumacher, is that the name? Long ago, they changed their name now to Practical Action. They have a website on Apropedia that describes all their activities, many of which are related to bringing out this kind of solar system. And Sun Connect is a newsletter based on this work in Africa, but paying attention to what's going on in that as yet developed world, I think is of critical importance because the developed world market for this is already hundreds of millions of dollars per year in a trajectory that is going to trillions of dollars because we started this century with what was an estimated 4 billion people without access to modern energy. And they really do need some access to modern energy. Here's a bunch of references where you can go learn a bunch more. How to email me if you want to be on the list. And if you want to come to the ad hoc working group meetings, I'll send you the invite. So this is targets I think we can start to do right away. And I'm going to wrap up really quickly now. You can read all this later, study it all later, check the links. Um, I have been doing some of this with 1% of my own holdings and my own retirement accounts. And right now, the average of those investments is earning me about 8% per year. And they're all invested in similar kinds of projects that have to do, in my case, with energy, food, farming, water systems. Uh, One of my energy projects that I put some financing in is a equity crowd investing entity. I've actually put money into three of them. Two are already doing projects in Michigan. The third one has a CEO who lives in Michigan now, and he's opening up a new fund to do agrivoltaics projects. And so this is a real opportunity. I also got to invest in a community solar project in New Hampshire because not 100% of all the investment has to come from New Hampshire. They could reach out and let people come from other states and put in a little money too. So it's working well. It's paying me back. These are funds, the names of funds, and a very brief description that I am going to be working on in the next 12 months with the National Coalition for Community Capital. I already mentioned the agriculture idea and working with this entity called Kilowatts for a Cause. They will be helping to set up funding that can go directly to agrivoltaics. We can fund any kind of food and farm project that will pay for itself through energy savings. And there are potentials all over there. Food systems, low income utility programming that we can make for ourselves that can far exceed what the utilities are legally required to do. They have been doing the minimum now for 50 years. I think it's time we get off that track and start doing more. So on and on and on. I'm very excited about the waterways stewardship, the people who are working to protect all of our surface waters and all of our rivers and the Great Lakes are extremely interested in what can we do to use natural methods to manage our water and help make sure the water gets cleaned up before it gets dumped into our surface water. So it's a way we can do it. This talks about the NC3 project. Please study that later. This is a very interesting table from a guy I'm working with at this entity called sustainableinvest.org. He's a researcher who has been studying how to do special kinds of investments in Wall Street. He's been doing that work for more than 20 years. And now together we're working on ideas about how to do more of it locally and using some of the local techniques. But one thing he noticed from all the top performing sustainable funds by Wall Street entities is the most commonly held stocks by the 10 top performing funds were all specialty energy stocks that are one way or another, a lot of them very closely related to this plug-in power. So I thought that was very interesting. A wonderful quote that came from our recent TV show on PBS. And this was a flyer that was put together by the group. I'm also a board member of the Capital Area Friends of the Environment, and we're reaching out to all of our members, inviting them to come and participate and help plan these opportunities. Next steps for anybody who wants to learn more about this self-financing idea and how we might all be the investors, and a list at the bottom of many organizations that are doing fabulous work in that realm. And that's it. Woo, how'd we do for time?
Okay, yeah, why don't you stop the screen sharing?
Yay.
People who would like to ask a question, use the virtual hands because, we have about 70 people on the Zoom, and so we can't see you all. So the virtual hands are down at the bottom. You can go under React, and under React, you can see raise a hand. But I'll start out with some questions in the chat room. We have a real good basic one from Carolyn. Can you explain how the power generated by the panel translates to power we can use in our home? We plug it in, and what happens?
Uh, well, then, if the unit itself has a battery, you can plug into the battery, and the batteries very, very often have both AC plugs and DC plugs. So now most of them have USB-C connectors, and they can go up to about 140 watts. They have USB-A connectors that can go up to maybe 18 watts or 20 watts, not much above that. Um, and then at my house, we have used our portable battery to run the refrigerator during a 3-day utility grid outage. So that's one possible technique. The other technique to use is, you know, the sun is shining on your panel, so go turn something on and use it. Or the sun is shining on your panel and you don't have to do anything. It's just offsetting your utility bill by providing power that you're using behind your own meter. So there's really, with a battery, there's maybe more thought has to go into it. Without the battery, uh, you just plug stuff in the way you normally would. It's so simple. That's one of the advantages of it.
Yeah, the simplicity is a real advantage, isn't it? John asked you. You mentioned about a European system, about $200. What size system is that we're talking about?
They can go up to 800 watts of solar, and I think they can have the capability to produce and deliver 2,000 watts of peak power, but they're limited to sending out to the grid no more than 800, and no more than 800 on the circuit for any length of time, because it can heat up the wires too much.
Yeah, John also asked, under European rules, is outflow to the grid possible? And is also this. He has the same question for Utah. Can you have outflow to the utility in either Germany or Utah?
Yes, you can, certainly. And then with these plug-in systems in Utah, they are explicitly saying, if you send power out to the grid, you're not compensated for that. You're not net metering. So you're giving away that energy to somebody else if you send it to the grid. And that's, I think, one of the reasons why the utilities were not fighting over this at all. It's going to be a small amount of energy. They'll lose that much energy all the time just because their systems aren't yet smart enough to know what goes where and where did it come from and how much got lost in the wires. So, they're just considering it not that important distinction. However, if there are laws and rules that do allow interconnection and do allow sellback, the same systems can be employed with that in mind. And in my own personal house, we're using some AC batteries that are interconnected with our local municipal utility. And I can send power back to the municipal utility. I prefer not to, because they don't pay me anywhere near as much as it's worth to me, or as much as it's worth to my neighbor that they're selling it to. But at least I get compensated a little bit when it happens.
Yeah, Jeffrey, go ahead with your question.
Yeah, so a couple of questions. So first, correct me if I'm wrong here, but as far as I know, none of these systems can be used disconnected from your house to draw power, because they have to be connected to the grid in order to be providing power from an outlet or something.
Oh,
Is that
no,
right?
no, 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 that's a misunderstanding.
Not true.
When they're unplugged from the grid, if you have solar and it has a smart inverter, then when the sun is shining, you can plug that panel into anything and run that thing. Or if it's interconnected with a battery, you can take it off grid. You don't necessarily have to unplug it because the plug itself will be smart enough, but you take it off grid or you put it in your car and you take it somewhere and you plug your stuff into the battery. So
Okay,
yes,
great.
they can be used even if the power is not running. Now, the safety aspect is they won't send power to a grid unless that grid is stable and operating the way it's supposed to. And so if my battery system at home disconnects from the grid because it notices an instability, it won't reconnect for until there's been stability for at least 5 minutes. So it's
Okay. Well,
watching, and when it's safe, it matches the sine wave and reconnects me.
okay, that's great to know. So the other question was, I'm not sure I completely understood all the investment things, as unfortunately I came late to this meeting, I had another meeting. But I'm wondering, do you know Michael Richardson of Third Act, upstate New York? So,
I, I don't, but I do know about Third Act, and they are inviting me to give a national presentation in a week or so to them,
okay, great. Yeah, because I'm
including the
very
Michigan
active.
group.
I'm
Me too.
very active in the San Francisco Bay Area, Third Act, and we're looking for speakers. And also, I'm also part of um, an organization. This is what we did, which is kind of a partner for Third Act, and we have peer counselors that advise people on green, where to put your money in the banks or credit unions or credit cards or insurance, and
Oh,
also
excellent.
investments. So,
Yeah,
and Michael Richardson has been super active in that, working with Green America on some webinars on green investing, and
fabulous.
so it'd be a really good connection to make, I
I
think.
I will work for you then starting tomorrow. Give me the information. I'm doing this with the expert from Wall Street already, and we're making all kinds of case studies of my experimentation and how it's working, and new ideas about how to make this work even better.
Okay, great. I will send you my email address and also Michael's through the chat, and maybe you could provide yours somehow. Thanks.
Mine is on the slide deck, and yes, certainly we can.
Hey, Tom, in the chat, Barbara asks, her apartment building doesn't have any electrical outlets on the balcony. And so is there some easy way to deal with that? Because you probably don't want to have your door open all winter.
Well, that's right. You sure don't.
Yeah.
Oh boy. You can get yourself a little insulated box and put your battery in the box. That's one possibility. You can ask the landlord about permission to run essentially an extension cord or a circuit. I mean, it, it takes away from the economics of this if you have to spend hundreds of dollars to hire an electrician and come have them wire something new. I mean, that's one of the reasons why this is working so well and selling like hotcakes in Europe, is because there are plugs on the balconies and all they have to do is bring it home and plug it in. If there's no plug, yeah, there's probably some workarounds that are pretty decent. And actually, a lot of people are starting to put these systems on a rack on wheels, and then they put it where it needs to be in the sun during the daytime, and it can hold the battery. And then later on, they can take the battery and use it wherever they want. So maybe not a perfect solution, but there's options at least.
Would a balcony system prevent outflow to the grid on its own versus a utility needing to meter in outflow? Typical Michigan utilities, right, bill for any outflow as it was inflow, unless customer is set up as a solar customer. How's this handled in Europe?
Um, yes, the systems have that intelligence quite literally built into the plug. So all you have to do is plug it in, and then the plug has its sensing equipment inside, and the inverter is in line with that and smart enough to know if the grid isn't stable, I do not ever feed anything backwards. That's how it works. And
Okay.
it's good enough that all over Europe now these are being approved and installed, and the numbers are just skyrocketing.
So in Utah, it sounds like um, the utilities would have had to change their metering so that they ignore any outflow from a non-inflow outflow customer. So here in Michigan, all the utilities would have to change their metering systems, which they always get goofed up anyway. They'd have to at least change it to ignore outflow, which they could do. I'm sure they could do that technically, but that's what Utah does. And
Well,
probably that's what Europe does. There's no
yeah,
compensation for outflow.
probably, and the metering technology is smart enough to do this, and you just have to program it to do that. If the utilities bought us 1 million meters and they cannot be reprogrammed to do this, well, then that expense should be disallowed by the commission.
Sure.
How could the utility do that? And the utilities have been fighting with us for 30 years about their ability to add a line on their bills so that we can run Michigan Saves financing on the utility bill. For 30 years, they've been pretending it's too expensive to do. But we can ask our insurance company and our cell phone company if they can change the bill every month. Somehow they've figured out how they can do it. So I should think a utility is also smart enough to learn this trick too, if we insist on it.
Hey, Dale, in the chat, you asked about a payback period for a
Oh.
small setup panel. Why don't you ask the question right
So,
now?
so Tom, how do you think payback or like return on investment for a small system like this would compare to rooftop solar in terms of whatever dollars per watt or 7 to 10 years maybe is
Right. That's literally my significant project for next year, is to analyze all different kinds of devices. How much energy do they need to keep them charged? And then how much can I avoid on my utility bill by using devices that I power with my solar and my batteries? And I'm not the only one doing that. I'm working with a whole bunch of people from all over the world, really, on what are all these kinds of devices that people care about? How much do they cost to buy the devices, plug them in? Do they cost more than a device that can't be charged from solar and so forth? The worldwide manufacturers of all of our electric stuff and electronic stuff are already hard at work trying to figure out how everything can be AC and DC hybrid, so that all the things that we own now that are AC only would always have a input on the back someplace where you can plug DC directly into them. And then also think about the experience we had where we were able to save a refrigerator full of food during a 3-day outage. The refrigerator full of food, I assure you, was worth at least several $100s, and the whole system to do that only cost 300. So in a sense, my system already paid it for itself in the first 12 months twice over, and everything else I get from it will just be bonus. Not to mention that now I'm learning to unplug and turn off light bulbs all over the house and replace them with LED lights that just click up with a magnet. And when I need to charge them, I charge them. And when I need to put them back in place, I put them in place. I'm keeping track of how long do they last on a charge and blah, blah, blah. And I'm going to do the economic analysis with a bunch of other people, and we'll make all that public.
Yeah, we've got another 10 minutes here. I think we've gone through the chat. So who's got the next question or comment? Raise your virtual hand, please.
You're
Okay.
making me all very happy, and I'm really excited to learn about some of these other groups that I could work with, like This Is What We Did. Very exciting.
Hey, go ahead, Kurt.
Okay, thanks. You're on mute, Kurt. Kurt is still muted. Abraham, can you unmute?
I'm unmuted. So
Okay,
you
go
were
ahead,
talking
Abraham. Okay,
about
wait, Kurt is unmuted. Let's go ahead, Kurt.
Okay, Tom, real quick, can you explain how uh, the inverter actually takes its DC and synchronizes it with utilities sine waves before the power goes into the AC system in your house? You gotta,
No, in my home battery, those are AC inverters. So the inverters themselves are sending AC from the panels to my battery bank and my controller in the basement, and that's AC all the way.
but
But
how do you synchronize it to the utility sine wave?
the system and those inverters are smart enough to do that on their own.
Okay.
They don't need any help. Those provisions have been in the inverter manufacturer requirements going all the way back to 2011. And, they've been refined and they've been improved, and California has proved it. Hawaii has proved it. Uh, these are now part of the whole process of setting up smart inverters, and the UL testing of inverters that's been going on for years already. So there is no real safety hazard concern here. They react so fast that nobody's yet gotten injured from one of these malfunctioning and doing the wrong thing.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, go ahead, Abraham.
You were talking about a stack with your slides. I don't see that listed in the chat. Are they going to be uploaded on the GLRA website?
Yeah, John, you'll make the slides available through the GLREA website. I'm happy to email them to anybody too, but
I don't think so. I'll let John Freeman answer that.
Oh.
I mean, I can, if I have your slide deck, so I can individually, if people email me, send it out to folks.
I
Or
can do
people
the
could
same
email you
thing.
too, for that matter.
Right, I can do the same thing, and I will post it to my website as well.
Okay. And what's your website?
communityenergysolutions.info.
Okay. communityenergysolutions.info.
Right.
Okay.
It's all
Okay.
one word, Community Energy Solutions, no spaces.
Was
I'll put
Did
my
any-
contact stuff in the chat here in a second.
go ahead, Becky.
So just to be clear, you can use a plug-in system without a battery just to basically cut down on your electrical costs.
Yes.
But a battery basically just as resiliency if there's a power outage. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's how I look at it.
Okay.
That was easy.
Well, wait a minute. Wait a minute. I'm not sure that's entirely right, because if you don't have a battery and you're plugging in a solar panel, which is hanging over your balcony, into your electrical socket, you're connecting it, the energy is getting transmitted throughout your apartment, hypothetically, through the grid, which is within the apartment building. And then, of course, that's connected to the outer grid. So if the grid goes down because of a storm and you don't have a battery, then I think that your plug-in solar is not going to work. Just like I have solar on my roof at my house, I don't have a battery. And if the grid goes down, my solar system goes down too. So I think the key element about the plug-in solar, and in fact, Lexi, who's on this, I think she's on this solar story. She actually has a small little plug-in solar. The idea is that you can plug it into your socket and you're feeding somehow electricity within your little apartment. And so you're reducing the amount of electricity you're buying from DTE in order to power some of your appliances, like Tom listed within one of the slides. Now, I don't know exactly how that works, but as Tom pointed out, it seems to work quite well in Germany by just plugging it into your socket in your apartment. And presumably, the folks in Utah have figured out that it can work there as well. But you don't have, I think getting a battery will complement it, but I don't think you have to get a battery for this to work.
I agree. That's right. You don't have to have a battery.
Abraham, do you have another question? Oh, maybe not. Okay,
Lexi,
Paul,
do you
go.
want to, Lexi, do you
Go.
want to share your experience?
Well, I wanted to share my experience. I have solar and batteries and a smart inverter.
Okay.
And
Go
so,
ahead, Paul.
so because I have a smart inverter, I paid extra for an inverter that would provide power for my house when the grid goes down. It disconnects from the grid and its own little microgrid. Most solar systems in the United States have a cheap inverter that when the grid goes down, it just shuts down. Most people with solar in the United States do not get any solar power when the grid goes down. You have to pay extra for a smart inverter and have batteries to make that work.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, thank you. Steve, go ahead. I see Steve smiling, kind of waving.
I can't find my chat button.
Okay, go ahead.
I like to simplify it by just to follow up from that is it's no different than going out and buying a more efficient refrigerator. You're just slowing the meter down. You don't have to don't have to overthink it. Just it's just like turning off some light. You're just slowing the meter down, and that's all you have to think about. And these are, of course, these are not. I think Paul he has the typical inverters are what they call grid following, which means they have to have a signal from the utility grid to operate, and that's why they shut off. The other type of inverter he has, which are sort of what do they call it, grid forwarding, but it's
Grid
it's
forming, I think.
grid forming. There you go. So yeah, I think people shouldn't overthink it. That's my comment.
Hey, Lexi, why don't you share with us your experience?
Sure. Yeah, definitely echo that last point. Not overthinking it is super important too. Mine probably is not the best example of true plug-in solar since it is just a battery system. I have a very small portable panel that is just about 100 watts. It connects to a battery and the whole thing stays outside on my small balcony here in Michigan. I found that it really honestly gets everything charged I need on a daily basis in terms of laptop, phone, some battery powered lights like the one Tom was referencing. And I did even run my air conditioning off of it for like 10 minutes once when it was really hot. And yeah, I would just advocate for whatever solar you feel comfortable pursuing at the moment, whatever scale that is, still go for it. I totally agree with what Tom has been talking about, and what this whole discussion has been talking about, a way to plug in and power your whole apartment. That's pretty awesome. But yeah, just a reminder, every kilowatt counts, and that's a fun way to do it too.
So the bottom line, Lexi, is a solar panel charges your battery, and then you can plug in your air conditioning unit or your laptop into the battery, and it will charge the laptop on your computer, or it will power the air conditioning. Otherwise, if you had your air conditioning on when it was connected, plugged into the wall socket, you would be having to pay power from DTE in order to power it. Okay.
That's correct. Yeah, the battery has an outlet in it as well as like USB and USB-C. The panel itself also has just USB and USB-C. So when the sun is shining and I'm outside, I can charge my devices outside. Otherwise, the benefit of a small battery is to bring it inside and power things that would normally go into the wall. And yeah, thanks for clarifying, John. I have just like a window AC unit, so it does plug into the wall normally. Thanks.
Hey, thanks, Lexi. Jay, go ahead.
Yeah, this is not at all unlike using a micro inverter such as the N-phase IQ7. I had 16 of those on my garage roof. Of course, when the sun was shining, they produced power. They default to not exporting any power onto the grid by making sure they never output a voltage higher than what the grid already is. So they always track just below it, which guarantees no current flows outbound. And they already have the IEEE requirements in them that if they lose the grid, the stability from the grid, they see that disappear. And we won't go into the smoke and magic of how that takes place. But when they see the grid disappear, they automatically shut down. That way they never, ever, ever backfeed the grid under any conditions, but they do offset your energy use during the sunlit hours of the day.
Hey, thank you, Jay. And we're at 8 o'clock, so it's time to kind of adjourn. Thank you, Tom, for a very interesting discussion.
Thank you,
And,
everybody. Wonderful
thanks to
questions.
everybody for attending. Next week, we're going to have Ben DeWerke talk to us about the Michigan Climate Investment Hub. This will be facilitating innovative financing strategies related to renewable energy and climate change. So hope you can join us next week, Thursday evening, 7 to 8. And again, thanks to everybody for coming. And
Thank you, GLREA.
have a good weekend. Take care, everybody.
So, John, if I signed up for this, will I get an email about that? Because I'm not normally on your list.
Yes. John, if you signed up for this one, John will put you on an email list that will get you an announcement, a meeting notice. Yep.
Great. And Tom, I put my email in the chat. I don't know if you saw
Oh,
it.
thank
And
you.
Michael
I'll go-
Richardson's also.